Good day. The Russiagate affair has had a strange and peculiar coda with the publication by The Guardian of a story written in part by the journalist Luke Harding, who has a certain reputation for publishing stories about Russia, which claims to provide information about a meeting of Russia's Security Council in January 2016, at which President Putin of Russia allegedly instructed the Russian intelligence community to assist Donald Trump in getting elected President of the United States, as Donald Trump successfully did later that year in November. Now, this document, or series of documents that this Guardian article refers to, is not published in full by The Guardian, though they do provide a glimpse of some of the words in it. But they say, The Guardian says, that it has circulated amongst Western governments and has supposedly been verified by Western Russia experts, though who they are, The Guardian does not say. The article is full of caveats and qualifications, which make one wonder whether there's any real confidence in the authenticity of this particular document or set of documents. And I would add, and very remarkably and very interestingly, there has been almost complete silence across the rest of the media, the British media and the US media, in discussing this document. Though there was an article which I saw in Washington Examiner, which said that the documents should be treated very skeptically, and that it seemed as if there were good reasons to doubt that they were actually genuine. Well, I'm going to make a few observations here. Firstly, let's begin with what the documents purport to say. They purport to say that there was a meeting in January of Russia's Security Council, that is Russia's highest policy-making body, which is chaired by Putin. Well, such a meeting did indeed take place, and it was the fact that the meeting was published on Vladimir Putin's website, the Kremlin's website, and it's not difficult to find a record of that meeting there, though it certainly doesn't say any of the things, that public record, certainly doesn't say any of the things that these papers, which the Guardian appears to have, allege were discussed at that meeting. Anyway, that's the first thing to say. The second is that the documents the Guardian claims to have seen purport to have arisen from a recommendation by one of Putin's aides that steps be taken by Russia to help Donald Trump's election, because doing so would be more advantageous to Russia, given that it would create political instability and chaos in the United States, and that this was considered by the Security Council at that meeting, and that Putin signed off an instruction, a decree supposedly, instructing various the Russian intelligence community to do all in their power to help Donald Trump win the election, and appointing an interagency committee headed by General Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, to supervise this operation. And the documents also apparently say that the Russians possess some compromat, or compromising blackmail material, on Donald Trump, which they collected over the course of Donald Trump's various visits to Russia, though it doesn't say what that material is. Apparently it is supposed to have been set out in an appendix, but that appendix is not provided, and it isn't apparently part of this stash of documents that The Guardian has seen. And lastly, it also these documents also make certain rather unflattering comments about Donald Trump they mentioned that he is mentally unstable and therefore someone who is likely to cause instability within the United States, which is supposedly what the Russians want. And that's what we're told about these documents. And it's perhaps important to say that the assumption that many people are making is that these documents have only come to light recently and have only been circulating amongst Western governments and Western officials recently. And it's also perhaps important to say that The Guardian itself appears to have only seen these documents very recently, or at least that's the implication of this article in The Guardian, and that this is in effect a recent leak from the Kremlin of a document that is said to be important and secret, and which is supposed to set out one of the early steps the Russians took, allegedly, in order to help Donald Trump win the presidential election in November 2016. And various people who are skeptical about the story, I've already mentioned Washington Examiner, have already picked holes in the account of Russian decision-making, which is set out in this document or purported document and in this article, and I'll come to all that in a moment. But I have to say that I wonder whether in fact this is quite such a recent leak as everybody assumes that it is. As I very well recall, back on June 23rd, 2017, a massive article appeared in the Washington Post which discussed a leak from the Kremlin, extracted by by an intelligence source, which purported to provide details of the decisions that that Putin and the Russians had made to interfere in the US election. And I'm going to read out a few paragraphs from that article, which appeared in the Washington Post on 23rd June 2017. They read as follows. Early last August, that's to say August 2016, an envelope with extraordinary handling restrictions arrived at the White House. Sent by courier from the CIA, it carried eyes-only instructions that its contents be shown to just 4 people, President Barack Obama and 3 senior aides. Inside was an intelligence bombshell, a report drawn from sourcing deep inside the Russian government that detailed Russian President Vladimir Putin's direct involvement in a cyber campaign to disrupt and discredit the US presidential race. But it went further. The intelligence captured Putin's specific instructions on the operation's audacious objectives: defeat or at least damage the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, and elect her opponent, Donald Trump. The CIA breakthrough came at a stage of the presidential campaign when Trump had secured the GOP nomination, but was still regarded as a distant long shot. Clinton held comfortable leads in major opinion polls, and Obama expected that he would be transferring to power to someone who had served in his cabinet. The intelligence on Putin was extraordinary on multiple levels, including as a feat of espionage. For spy agencies, gaining insights into the intentions of foreign leaders is amongst the highest priorities, but Putin is a remarkably elusive target. A former KGB officer, he takes extreme precautions to guard against surveillance, rarely communicating by phone or computer, always running sensitive state business from deep within the confines of the Kremlin. So this article, which appeared in the Washington Post, says that the CIA had obtained a document, or rather it seems a series of documents, which appeared to confirm Putin's direct instructions on launching the operations known as Russiagate, the series of Russian operations supposedly known as Russiagate. And the CIA took this all so seriously that they put all this information together in a sealed envelope and sent it by hand, by courier, to the White House in August 2016, where it was read by Obama. And that was the point where Russiagate supposedly, in a very real way and in a very big way, apparently began. Now, I have to say that when I read that article back in June 2017, I was skeptical and I did wonder what exactly this document could be. And I did think for a time that perhaps what was referred to here was the Steele dossier. But it turned out that it was not. And it turned out that the CIA did indeed have a spy at that time within the higher levels of the Russian government. And the Russians have identified this person as a man called Oleg Smolenkov, who was an aide working for a man called Ushakov, who is a senior foreign policy aide of President Putin's. And the Russians confirmed that Smolenkov had disappeared on a holiday in Montenegro in June 2017, and that he had then moved to the United States, where he's apparently been provided with substantial financial compensation by the CIA and now owns a large house there. Note that Smolenkov vanished from Russia in June 2017, and it's in June 2017, 23rd June 2017, that this article appeared in the Washington Post. Now, I'm going to make a few quick observations. I think it is highly likely, I can't be obviously sure, but I think it is highly likely that this series, this stash of documents that Luke Harding is talking about in this Guardian article is in fact the material that Smolenkov provided to the CIA and which the CIA forwarded to Obama in that sealed envelope in August 2017. Note that the June 23rd 2017 article in the Washington Post says that the intelligence had captured Putin's specific instructions on the operation's audacious objectives. And that appears to be what these documents that The Guardian has now got its hands on apparently does. That the CIA breakthrough came at a stage of the presidential campaign when Trump had secured the GOP nomination, but was still regarded as a distant long shot. Now, that would be consistent with what we know about the situation in January 2016, when this supposed meeting of the Russian Security Council supposedly took place, at which Putin supposedly gave these instructions. Trump at that point looked as if he was most likely going to become the Republicans' presidential candidate. He'd seen off challenges by people like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, and though he was not at that point yet nominated as the candidate, he had nonetheless, in January 2016, positioned himself in where it looked almost certain that he would be the Republican candidate. Now, perhaps it's also important to say that it's most unlikely that the CIA itself actually gained possession of these documents in January 2016. The high probability is that they sent this report to Obama in August 2016, and that means that they would probably have obtained this information, this material, this particular document dump around then, August or perhaps July 2017 rather than January. And we also learn again from the Washington Post that this report was drawn from sourcing deep inside the Russian government. And again, that seems consistent with the documents that Luke Harding and The Guardian have just published. So we have a set of documents. I suspect they originate in 2016. I suspect that they were produced to the CIA sometime around 2016, forwarded to Obama in August 2016 in advance of the election, and that it is these documents that, as I said, Luke Harding and The Guardian are now publishing. And if so, then it is highly likely that this cache of documents which Luke Harding and The Guardian are waving around are in fact the key documents which were the foundation of the whole Russiagate affair. More so, perhaps, than the Steele dossier, more so indeed than the other documents, the other things like the information about the cyber attacks and all the rest. Now, note a few things about these documents. There's no suggestion of collusion in them between Donald Trump and his campaign and the Russians. And despite the claims in the Washington Post story about how the intelligence apparently captured Putin's direct involvement in the cyber campaign, there's no actual instructions to launch a cyber campaign, though there is apparently a reference to planting media viruses in these Russian or purported Russian documents, and that could be what this refers to. So what do I think about all of this? Do I actually give any credence to this document? Do I go along with some of the claims that have been made about them? Well, I think the short and straightforward answer is I don't take these documents as true at all. They look to me to be fake. I can't say that definitely and categorically because I haven't seen them, but I can see obvious problems with them. And I would have thought that well-informed analysts would have problems with these documents also. First of all, let's make a quick observation about Mr. Smolenkov, who I think very likely is the sole begetter or originator or provider of these documents to the CIA. Now, as I said, he was a middle-ranking official within the Russian government. He was certainly not someone with direct access to the Security Council, which is the highest organ of the Russian government, though there's no doubt at all that he would have obtained access to certain information which does appear at high levels in the Russian government through his connection to Mr. Ushakov, who is indeed a senior aide. But it's unlikely that really serious and important classified information would be circulated to someone at his level. Anyway, that's the first thing to say. But putting that aside, and I accept I might be wrong about that, it is incredibly easy for someone in Smolenkov's position to make up himself documents like this. It is, after all, a well-known fact that the Security Council meeting in Russia did indeed take place on the day stated. As I said, the fact has been confirmed. It was confirmed at the time on the Kremlin's own website. It would be very easy to construct a report, or what purported to be a summary of a report provided to Putin by one of Putin's aides. That aide is no doubt a real person, and it would be very easy to create a document that appeared to transmit that information from that aide to Putin, or at least a summary of that report from that aide to Putin. And it would be very easy also for someone in Smolenkov's position to go further and produce a document which purported to capture Putin's actual instructions, and even to provide a text or part of a text of an order or a decree supposedly made by Putin. But that doesn't prove that these documents weren't actually made up by Smolenkov himself. As I said, they could very easily have been created by him. It would be a very easy thing to do. And bear in mind, given his position, he would have been able to use perhaps some of the actual stationery and also add some of the stamps, which might not originate directly from Putin himself, but which might look convincing because they would be genuine stamps used by Russia's presidential administration. So it would not be difficult for someone like Smolenkov to make up these documents. And there are facts which, for me, point very, very strongly to those documents being indeed made up in this way. And I'm going to say very briefly what I think those are. Firstly, it seems to me inherently implausible that in January 2016, anybody in the Kremlin took the possibility of Donald Trump being elected president of the United States at all seriously, or took at all seriously the idea that Russia would be able to do anything that would be able to help Donald Trump get elected. So already there is that inherent implausibility in this whole affair. But there are other perhaps more serious and important problems. Firstly, the language of this document, to the extent that I know about it, or at least to the extent that Luke Harding and his colleagues are reproducing it, seems to me wrong. It seems to me to reflect Western talking points. This idea about Trump being mentally unstable seems extremely unlikely that the Russians would have been saying that to each other in January 2016. What information would they have which would point to that? I think that is difficult to believe that the Russians in January 2016 would be thinking that. In June 2016, when these documents may have been provided to the CIA, or perhaps July, or perhaps August, well, there were people who were saying those sort of things about Donald Trump at that time. And it's possible to imagine that somebody in Moscow being asked to provide information about what the Russians were doing by the United States might have picked up some of these comments that were being made at that time in the United States about Donald Trump and about Donald Trump's personality. So that might be correct for June, July, August 2016, but January 2016 looks extremely unlikely. Then there are the things that this document says about the effect of sanctions on Russia, which appear to suggest that Russia is having a really hard time because of the sanctions, and that, in fact, the United States was that they needed to change the political situation in the United States to gain some sanctions relief. Again, that doesn't seem to me at all like what the Russians are saying to each other, or would have been saying to each other at the time, or indeed later. On the contrary, my overwhelming impression is that both at the time and since, the Russians have been focused on actually resolving the problems created by the sanctions, and that they would not be speaking about the sanctions in this kind of way, even in private documents circulated amongst themselves. And then there is the purported purpose of helping Donald Trump, which is to create chaos and instability in the United States itself. Now, I find that an impossible objective for the Russians to have held in January 2016, or indeed at any other time. I think that far from the Russians wanting to see instability in the United States, either then or later, they would, on the contrary, have been extremely concerned and worried about it. After all, the United States is a superpower, a nuclear superpower, with which Russia is in a state of confrontation. It was in a state of confrontation in 2016, and it is in a state of confrontation with the United States now. Countries that find themselves in a state of confrontation with the United States, which is a nuclear superpower, would not want that kind of instability and chaos at the top of the US government, because from their point of view, that would make US actions unpredictable and potentially dangerous. So I would have thought that the Russians would be extremely skeptical about any suggestion made to them in January 2016 that they set out to destabilize the United States by getting Donald Trump elected president. I have to also say that I wonder whether the Russians actually would expect the election of Donald Trump to indeed destabilize the United States in that kind of way. It's been suggested that the papers say that the Russians expected that this would create an enormous degree of polarization in the United States. Well, that became clear over the course of the 2016 election. But was it really something that the Russians could have anticipated as early as January 2016? Was it something that they really would have wanted? I find, again, all that extremely difficult to believe, to put it mildly. And then there is, for me, the single point about this document, which I find the absolute clincher. And that is the suggestion that the Russians have blackmailed material on Donald Trump. Well, there's no evidence of that. There's never been any evidence of that. The only information we've ever had that there was blackmail material about Donald Trump in Russian hands is the Steele dossier, which made all those bizarre claims about what Donald Trump is supposed to have done in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel whilst he was on a trip to Moscow to attend a Miss Universe competition. So that story about what Donald Trump allegedly did in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel has been essentially discredited, and there is no information that the Russians have any other material about Donald Trump which could possibly form the basis upon which they could blackmail him. And then we come to the further problem. Why would the Russians think that if Donald Trump were elected president of the United States, they would be able to blackmail him? Surely any attempt to blackmail the president of the United States would massively backfire. It would very, very quickly become known to the top officials of the US government, and it would provoke a political crisis which would not only see the president fall, but which would create problems for Russia when it became known that they were trying to blackmail no less a person than the president of the United States. None of this, none of the contents, the tone, the language, the content of this document that the Guardian claims that it has now found makes any sense to me at all. Now, I'm going to venture a guess, and I'm going to guess that this document was produced by Smolenkov, and I think that is the most likely explanation for its origins, in July 2016, and that he produced it at a time when the CIA was receiving the first, or was becoming aware of, some of the contents in Christopher Steele's dossier, and in particular, those early entries in the dossier, which were circulating in June 2016, which talked about the incident in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And I suspect that the CIA, the US officials, were trying to find out at that time whether or not that incident in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel did actually take place, and whether in fact the Russians did in fact have compromising material on Donald Trump. And I'm going to guess that they turned to their man in Moscow, Mr. Smolenkov, and asked him to provide that information. And as some spies do, he went ahead and did. And that this is the information that he came up with, and that he produced these documents in order, in effect, to verify and corroborate the story about the Ritz-Carlton Hotel incident, which appears in the Steele dossier. Probably he wasn't provided with the information in the dossier itself, so he probably didn't know exactly what was alleged, which is why the talk of compromat in this latest document is extremely vague, but he would have been informed by his American controllers that there was concern about this in the highest level of the US government, and for that reason, Mr. Smolenkov went ahead and provided them that corroboration to the extent that he could. And these are the documents which we have seen. Well, does this thing happen in the world of espionage? Of course it does. Absolutely. That's why it is extremely difficult to assess information properly. There is a major division in intelligence between the people who collect the information and the people who analyze it. And many people have said that one of the fundamental problems at the moment is that the quality of analysis at the highest levels of the US intelligence community has deteriorated, so that they are not able to pick up what look to be implausible fakes, like I suspect this particular document is. Can I say, purely for the sake of parenthesis, that Graham Greene, the British novelist, who was himself at one time an intelligence officer, actually wrote a hilariously comic story, Our Man in Havana, which is precisely about an intelligence operative, a spy, fabricating information, which he then passed on to his controllers in London, and which the controllers in London gleefully accepted as true. Well, perhaps Mr. Smolenkov was not our man in Havana, but perhaps he was our man in Moscow, and perhaps he was up to something rather similar, and that this is the result. This particular set of documents is the result. Anyway, we know the sequel. There were massive investigations which were launched otherwise. I'm sure that Smolenkov's papers were circulated amongst all the various elements of the US intelligence community, including, by the way, the FBI, and that it formed much of their thinking about Russiagate. I'm also sure, by the way, that this document was shown to Congress and to the various representatives and their aides at around that time. They would not have spotted the problems with this document, and that probably explains why they went ahead and insisted that it was indeed the case that the Russians had been involved in this elaborate campaign to try and help Donald Trump win the presidential election, which is what all the congressional reports, including the Republican-dominated ones, said right through the course of the Russiagate affair. But I also suspect that as time has passed and as people have been revisiting this document, there are increasing doubts about it, and there is increasing skepticism on the part of some officials within the US intelligence community about whether this document is true. And that concern and that skepticism probably explains why now, all those years later, when parts of the document are being published, the rest of the American media and the British media are steering very clear of this story? Well, a lot of speculation here, and it could be that I'm wrong on many points. It could be that this document has nothing to do with Mr. Smolenkov, and that it appeared not in 2016, as I strongly suspect, but more recently, in which case, by the way, it is certain to be a fake. But I am far more inclined to believe that Mr. Smolenkov is indeed the originator of this document. How else would a document like this have appeared and would circulate in this way? And that, in fact, its appearance today is perhaps a desperate attempt on the part of some people to lend this document credibility by having extracts from it published in The Guardian. Well, we shall see. But if I am right, then this particular disclosure provides us with some insight into the origins of Russiagate in 2016. It also shows the great problems that the removal or the absence of top-level analysts in the US intelligence community. It's known that there was a cull of such analysts after the end of the Cold War. What the absence of such analysts, the problems it's creating, and it also shows us how a mischievous individual, in this particular case, Mr. Smolenkov, in unknown collaboration with another mischievous individual, Christopher Steele, came together and launched Russiagate between them. Well, thank you very much for joining me on this program about what I suspect today is, for many people, a historical question. I look forward to you joining me in future programs, both on this channel and on other channels, the Duran. And please also remember to check out Alex Christophorou's channel, my Alex and Colleagues' channel, which you will find links to under this video. Please also check us out on our other platforms, BitChute, SuperU, and Locals. And we have some very interesting ideas now being prepared for our Locals channel. And please also support us to the extent that you can via PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar, and by going to our shop and buying yourself the wonderful things that you will find there. Our amazing magic mugs, our hats, our hoodies, our t-shirts, our sweatshirts, and all the rest. And please also remember to tick the like button if you like this video, and please also check your subscription to this channel. And thank you very much for joining me today on this long and tangled, and if you like, historical subject. And I look forward to you joining me again on future programs, and have a wonderful day until then.